The aviation industry buried the Airbus A380 years ago. Production was cancelled. Airlines around the world dragged their superjumbos into desert storage and wrote them off as the great miscalculation of modern aviation. A four-engine giant built for a world that never arrived. That was the consensus. That was the obituary. And in 2026, the world's largest international airline is doing the exact opposite of everything that obituary assumed. Emirates is bringing more of its A380s out of storage, aiming for a fleet of 110 active superjumbos by the end of 2026, while every other operator rushes to retire the type, not maintaining, expanding, buying used superjumbos back from leasing companies, committing to fly them until 2041. The reason sits parked in neat rows at Payne Field in Washington state. Finished Boeing 777X airframes, waiting on certification, the aircraft Emirates ordered as its entire future, now roughly 7 years overdue. And the fix for that failure is not happening in Seattle, and it is not happening at Airbus headquarters in Toulouse. It is happening inside a hangar complex at Dubai International Airport called Emirates Engineering. Remember that name because by the end of this video, it will mean something very different than it does right now. Boeing has taken a $4.9 billion charge on this program, and the story of why the world's most famous jet builder cannot deliver a plane it announced 13 years ago starts, in part, with a door that blew off during a stress test. We will get there. First, the bargain that created all of this. The 777X project was launched 13 years ago in 2013, and it was pitched as the crowning achievement of the twin-engine era, bigger than any 787, more efficient than any four-engine jet, a wingspan of nearly 72 meters, the longest of any commercial jet, so long that Boeing engineered folding wingtips just so the aircraft could fit existing airport gates. Emirates did not just order this aircraft, Emirates built its entire fleet succession plan on top of it. The logic was clean. As the A380 fleet aged out through the 2020s, factory-fresh 777-9s would slide into their place seat for seat, route for route. The Super Jumbo would take a dignified retirement, and the handover would be seamless. Every part of that plan depended on one date. The 777X was originally expected to enter service in 2020. While Emirates waited, the world turned against the A380. Airbus announced the end of production, and the final Super Jumbo left the assembly line in 2021. The pandemic grounded long-haul fleets overnight, and airline after airline decided their A380s would simply never fly again. Air France retired the type. Others parked theirs in the desert and quietly let them rot. The industry consensus hardened into something close to law. Four-engine giants were finished, twin jets had won, and anyone still flying superjumbos at scale was flying a museum. There was clearly no market anymore for planes like the A380 and the 747. The thinking went, and the numbers seemed to prove it. But the dismissal ignored one variable that turned out to matter more than fuel burn, more than engine count, more than any spreadsheet. It ignored what happens when the replacement never shows up, because two separate forces were quietly converging on Dubai at the same time. Boeing's delays kept compounding, year after year, and premium travel demand came roaring back after the pandemic stronger than almost anyone forecast, filling first and business class cabins on exactly the kind of high-density trunk routes the A380 was born for. Two independent pressures, arriving from opposite directions, pointing at the same conclusion. For Emirates, the Super Jumbo was not the problem. The Super Jumbo was the answer. One man sat at the center of that conclusion. Sir Tim Clark, the president of Emirates, the executive who bet bigger on the A380 than any airline boss in history, and then bet bigger on the 777X than any of Boeing's other customers. When Boeing officially postponed first deliveries of the 777-9 to 2027, Clark publicly voiced his frustration. What he did next, behind the anger, is the genius fix this video is about. But to understand why the fix was necessary, you need to understand why the plane is late. And that story is worse than most people realize. Start with the engines. The 777X flies on the GE9X, the largest engines ever mounted on a commercial aircraft. And durability problems with those engines pushed the first test flight from mid-2019 into early 2020 and delayed certification from the start. Then, during the certification process, a door blew off the aircraft during a stress test. And that was only the beginning, because Boeing then absorbed the 737 MAX crisis after 2 fatal crashes, an event that consumed the company's leadership, its engineering resources, and its relationship with regulators. Then came the production quality failures of 2024, which forced in new senior leadership, and in late 2024, Boeing's workers went on strike. Each crisis alone might have cost months. Stacked together, they cost the better part of a decade. Then there is the detail most coverage skips entirely, and it is the one that explains why the delay keeps feeding on itself. Boeing built early 777-9s before the final certification requirements were even settled. As regulations changed, those early airframes needed to be upgraded through a process known as change incorporation, essentially reworking a finished airplane to match rules written after it was built. Boeing has gone as far as dismantling an early 777-9. And here is the twist. The airlines waiting for deliveries have already indicated they will not accept any of the modified airframes and are instead going to wait for new production planes, so the jets parked at Payne Field are not just late. Some of them may never carry a paying passenger at all. The bill for all of this landed in October 2025, when Boeing updated its certification timeline, said it now expected first delivery in 2027, and took a $4.9 billion pre-tax charge on the program. A 2027 delivery would make the 777X roughly 7 years late from its original service entry target, about 14 years after its launch. Now hold that image in your mind. In Everett, Boeing engineers taking apart finished airplanes to satisfy paperwork, and 40 minutes from the Dubai waterfront, the counter operation running at full speed. Inside Emirates engineering, the airline built a dedicated team of over 400 engineers and technicians who have logged approximately 4.4 million man-hours over 44 months, dismantling, upgrading, and rebuilding passenger cabins on the very aircraft the 777X was supposed to replace. One company reworking planes because it must, the other reworking planes because it chose to. That choice is the fix. So how do you make a 15-year-old jet feel new enough that passengers happily pay premium fares to sit in it? The answer costs $5 billion, and it looks like this. Emirates is running one of the most ambitious retrofit programs in aviation history, a $5 billion investment to completely refurbish 219 aircraft, 110 A380s and 109 Boeing 777s. Each retrofitted aircraft gets the signature 4-class configuration with next-generation seating, fully refreshed interiors, and the addition of the premium economy cabin. In parallel, Emirates is installing Starlink Wi-Fi across 232 aircraft, satellite internet on a jet that first flew when the iPhone was 3 years old. And this is not a press release promise, it is measurably happening. As of July 2026, Emirates has completed cabin retrofits on 100 wide-body aircraft, 47 A380s and 53 777s, with the entire overhaul managed in-house at the Emirates engineering facilities at Dubai International Airport, rather than outsourced to external maintenance shops. The fleet math is just as aggressive as the cabin work. Emirates has opted to purchase many of its A380s from aircraft lessors, with investment made into their operational efficiency to ensure they can last for another decade at least. And the timeline Clark has attached to this is genuinely startling. He says Emirates will continue operating its A380s for another 16 years, with the final aircraft not expected to retire until 2041. There is even a strange gift hiding inside the pandemic that makes this possible. The A380 was designed for an operational life of around 100,000 flight hours, roughly 20 years, but the pandemic groundings effectively paused that clock, giving many airframes a few extra years of life. The years the industry spent declaring the aircraft dead are the same years now keeping it alive. There is one threat left that Clark himself admits could break the plan, and it is not Boeing. He concedes that the dreaded supply chain could eventually limit how long the jet remains viable, because keeping a discontinued aircraft flying means sourcing parts for a plane nobody builds anymore. And that threat explains the one move Emirates made to insulate itself, the move almost nobody has noticed. Emirates has quietly started behaving like a manufacturer, not a customer of manufacturers, a manufacturer. Clark has confirmed that Emirates has begun manufacturing aircraft interiors in-house to support the cabin upgrades and improve reliability, and the airline is increasing its in-house capability for engine overhauls to sustain the type's service life. Think about what that actually means. Seat structures, cabin panels, the physical guts of the passenger experience produced by an airline for an airline, because the traditional supply chain could not be trusted to deliver. This is territory that has belonged to Airbus, Boeing, and their certified suppliers for the entire history of the jet age, and a carrier from Dubai is walking into it because waiting stopped being an option, and the configurations coming out of those hangars are not conservative. In May 2026, Emirates completed its first A380 reconfigured into a two-class layout, a 615-seat configuration that now stands as the highest capacity commercial aircraft currently in service. The jet the industry declared obsolete is, right now, the biggest passenger aircraft flying anywhere on Earth, and it earned that title in a Dubai hangar, not on an assembly line. Here is the part that completes the picture, though. None of this is revenge. Even after every slipped date and every public rebuke, Emirates reaffirmed its commitment to the 777X in November 2025 with an additional order for 65 aircraft because despite its criticism of the delays, it sees no viable alternative for its superconnector business model. Emirates still needs the 777X. It simply refuses to be held hostage by it. And that single sentence reframes everything. The 777X delay did not just hand Emirates a billion-dollar problem. It handed Emirates a capability that no other airline on Earth now has. So return to the obituary this video opened with. The industry buried the A380 because the numbers said a four-engine giant could not survive the twin-jet era. And on paper, the numbers were right. But obituaries make an assumption nobody thinks to check. They assume the replacement arrives on time. Take that assumption away, and the entire logic collapses. The A380 did not survive because the analysts were wrong about economics. It survived because Boeing was wrong about calendars, and because one airline decided that if the future would not show up, it would rebuild the past to a higher standard than the future promised. The delay will end eventually, certification will clear, the 777-9s will finally land in Dubai, and the parked rows at Payne Field will empty out. But the thing built during the waiting does not get unbuilt. The 400 engineers stay, the interior production lines stay, the engine overhaul capability stays. Emirates. Engineering entered this decade as a maintenance operation, the department that fixed what manufacturers delivered. It will leave this decade as the reason a discontinued aircraft became the flagship of the world's largest international airline, an airline that learned to do for itself what the industry could no longer do for it. So the next time you see photos of a freshly reactivated A380 ferried home from storage, rolling out of a Dubai hangar with cabins its own engineers built by hand, look closely at it. Somewhere along its route tonight, 10 kilometers over the ocean, it will pass high above finished 777Xs, still sitting on the ground, still waiting for permission to fly. One of those aircraft was the future, the other one is airborne.